interested in animation?
Okay, so in animation, it was because I wanted to tell my stories of Dungeons & Dragons online, and originally I had a blog where I just like retell the stories or talk about RPGs and stuff, and people watch and it's kind of interesting, but it's like, you really didn't, I could tell people, it wasn't engaging with the audience as much, and so I started telling them online through the stories, but like they really needed a visual format. They really had to have something else there, and so that was why I started trying to animate, and basically even like the stick figures. I could tell even the stick figures were like doing a little bit, like they were engaging people a lot more. And I originally went with stick figures for the first year when I was animating, and because I was just using a mouse, and so all the characters had to be just circles and squares, circles, squares, and lines, because you just had to use the line tool, and square and rectangle. But then after a year, I'm like, I need to upgrade, and so I got a drawing tablet and started practicing with that. And I did not draw prior to starting the YouTube channel about 3 years ago or so.
Right. Yeah. We all have to start somewhere.
I feel like creating gives me a sense of like I'm doing something that I'm putting stuff out into the world that wouldn't have existed otherwise. And even though it's like a lot of times I'm copying someone else's design, or I'm creating, you know, a costume based on artwork that exists, everyone makes costumes differently. So there are other people that do this character from Critical Role, and their costumes are just as beautiful and you know, elaborate. And we all have our own processes and strengths and things. So I like being part of a community that is so like open to sharing information and learning. I like to learn new processes and techniques all the time, and with cosplay there's never like, you're never gonna run out of things you can get good at. I think for like general attendees, if they're not already into cosplay, can maybe like inspire them to want to try it out. I think everyone should do one cosplay at least, because the joy of like wearing a thing you made and having people say that it looks really good, and then you get to say, oh, thank you, and then they're excited because it's a character that they like too. And for the general con, I just think it adds like a fun layer of like play and sort of, I don't know, whimsy, I guess. And especially cons like this where you can like meet the creators because they're doing a lot of signings and things, then you get to sort of thank them by showing, you know, these people that are making the shows and things that we all love, what you were inspired to make based on their work. So when I cosplay, I'm generally trying to recreate the look or the you know, outfit of a certain character that I really identify with or enjoy the personality of. I do a lot of LARPing, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's like D&D, but you're camping in the woods with your friends in costume. So cosplay is sort of it's a parallel to that in that I don't get to roleplay as often in costume, but I do get to sort of embody the spirit of that character. And occasionally when you meet other people in, you know, costumes from similar content, then you get to sort of have little moments. And so that's generally where I go to. Some costumes I'll do based on aesthetics only, but generally I need a connection to like the actual character to feel like it's worth my time to put in all the effort that it takes.
Going back all the way to the very beginning, shall we say, we were approached to do a Witcher TRPG by CDPR because we're, of course, you know, working with them on 2077, and we decided to go ahead with that. And I set up a whole pitch for the situation. This big, like, green binder that was basically the entire core system for the game. I went over and pitched that, and I had this long, heavily stressful pitch meeting that eventually got to the end of it, you know, we had a deal. And that was the beginning. Everything after that was 5 to 6 years of game design and iteration, going in every day and, you know, taking copious notes on the Witcher novels and the video games and any bit of lore that we could scrape up from anything that was considered within our canon. And then sort of condensing all those notes into a cohesive game as best as possible. You know, writing rules, testing those rules, going back, saying, you know, do they fit with the world of The Witcher? Does this feel like the world of The Witcher? And if it's yes, we move forward. If it isn't, we go back and we rewrite.
My name is Randy Schooneman. My official title, I think, is production manager, but you wear a lot of hats at a little company like that. Right now, our weeks will look different depending on what we're focused on right at then. Right now, it's Car Wars, so we'll come in and we'll talk about the cards we need to either design or go over. Maybe the rule book. Hey, we've got to do these little tweaks to the rule book. Somebody came back and they had feedback on this, or we need to line up a play test for this new mechanic, things like that. But other times we'd come in and kind of, you're spinning your wheels trying to come up with the next idea, the next thing, and you go, well, what about this? What's fun here? And then there's a small amount of, all right, well, let's just screw around for a little bit. See if something, like it generates something new, like something else comes along. The initial source is anything. Sometimes someone, like our boss, will come to us and say, hey, here's a license, I want you to make a game for it. Other times it is, hey, we played this other game over the weekend, it wasn't good, but it was in this genre. What could we do in that genre? How would we do it? And then sometimes we just come in and go, I had a dream about this mechanic, and here's what we're going to try to do, and we'll make a game, or we'll make a piece of garbage and go, that is no good. It falls apart right there.
I was always interested in game design from when I was probably about 8 or 9. I loved games in general, and I got the early D&D books, and I just basically both loved games and realized someone has a job. Someone made this book that I'm holding. I could have that job. I'm best known for creating the world of Eberron for Dungeons & Dragons, and I've done a lot of role-playing work over the years, but then we made Action Cats and Action Pups, which are very sort of casual, fun family games about telling silly stories about cats and dogs. And then we also made Illimat with the band The Decemberists, which is a sort of classic card game that we wanted to feel like it's like 100 years old and people have just forgotten about it. And so they're quite different, but to us, the sort of overriding theme is that we want games that bring people together, that, you know, people are having fun and telling stories with. The first thing for us is you want to really think about what are the defining elements of the property. You know, what is it that the audience expects and wants, and how you're doing that, and then you've got to combine that with, okay, but what makes a compelling game experience? No one game is going to appeal to everyone, and the danger that you have to make sure of is that you're actually recognizing someone can say this is a problem with the game, but really the problem is they are not the target audience of the game. Someone who says this isn't complicated enough, or this doesn't have enough tactical options, they may have a very valid point, or it may be that, yeah, we're actually not making this to be a complex tactical game, and unfortunately it's not really right for that person. So that's that tricky thing. If you've got to have a big enough sample that you can spot that and say, this is a trend that is a flaw with what we're trying to do. This, on the other hand, is an outlier that is because not every game is going to make everybody happy, and we're identifying our audience.
Keyforge is a unique deck game by Richard Garfield, who's the creator of Magic the Gathering. So each 36-card deck is completely unique, and that's all you need to play. You just need one deck, and players compete to gather amber, and you need 6 amber to forge a key. First player to forge 3 keys wins. I like to play a little defensively. There's a new house called Saurians, and they're like dinosaurs. And what they do is they take over the board, and they have a bunch of different effects where they protect each other and stuff like that. So that's how I like to do it. All the different creatures are really fun, and some of them have they're kind of silly, and some of them are just cool looking. So that's what kind of adds to the fun of the game. I guess one of my favorite memories is just playing Cards Against Humanity like late into the night with some friends in like the free play area and just having a good time.
I think trading card games really appeal to a lot of people because it's a sense of the evolution of the game. So you can buy some packs. It's fairly cheap to start. So like Magic has that whole thing where people play pack wars, right? So you play Magic the Gathering, people pull out a pack and they'll just like play out of that. But you can also make a deck with 40 cards and you can play that against whomever. But if you're really into the format, you can really deep dive on a lot of different ways to play. And I think that's kind of the value, is you got a lot of options to play in different ways, and there's a lot of ways to extend the game so you can make it your own kind of style. Like in Magic the Gathering, people play Canadian Highlander is a format where it's like a singleton format, 100 cards, but you can only have one of any card, you can't have multiples. And that leads to a completely different style of play, and also makes it incredibly expensive. I think that people put their time and money into a trading card game because it's like having any other kind of hobby. You've got some disposable income. You find something you enjoy doing. There's an appeal in crafting something yourself, and some people like to do woodworking. Some people like to do crochet and stuff. Some people like to work on their car. People like to have hobbies, and TCGs are one of those things where it's like, I have a set thing. I'm building my own little chess set. And I just, this is a fun way for me to interact with other people and see how good I can get at doing a certain thing.
Honestly, I think the nicest way to start is to get into another group where it's like, oh, everyone could, like someone to teach you, if that's possible, if you have any other friends that play, is to start as a player and then kind of learn from there. But sometimes people can't. I think online content, like there's a lot of live plays and stuff that people can watch and say like, oh, this is kind of how it's run. But then you pick up although I say that, but what always happens is someone watches a live play, wow, this is a lot of fun, and they pick up the book and they're like, I don't see any of this because it's just a reference manual. And not only that, but a lot of the Dungeons & Dragons rules are just on combat. It's how to kill people and stuff. And people get really confused when they're like, oh, that's cool. And then they pick up the book and they're like, where is the narrative story? It's like, you bring that to the table. And
Exactly.
or sometimes it's even frustrating if you, we'll point to modules. I think modules are a great way to you flip through them and you get some ideas about it. But once again, it's very confusing for people because they pick up the module and they flip through it and they just get like really confused because sometimes the module will say like, do whatever sounds interesting at the time. And it's like, okay, that's cool. What do I do though? Or it'd be like if you opened up a recipe for a cake and it's like, add any ingredients you think might be delicious. Like, yeah. I don't know what that is. One of the memories that I have is one time we had a fairly long session. Long for me. Like I tend to run like 3, 4, 5 hours. Like 5 is kind of pushing it for me. Right. We had like an 8, 9 hour session where I went over to a friend's house and I started running, and they went to this town, they fought a mind flayer, they got their asses handed them. They just got completely wrecked because they have a DC 15 intelligence save or being knocked stunned for a full minute. So we did a learning experience there. So they got wrecked, and then partway through the session, they go into this mine, and there's a bunch of orcs and stuff running around. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm closing up the game, and okay, we're gonna close it here. And they're like, we gotta get them. Because it was like they had fought them and they'd run into the mine, so it's like, we're after them. And so they had this entire fight inside this mine. There's a capital. The players are going around the capital, planning stuff out. Right. And they have this entire setup that they've worked out because they've mapped out the place and figured out, we're gonna be in this church, we're gonna do a last stand, we're gonna draw them in here, we're gonna put explosives in the church, blah, blah, blah. And they're doing all this fighting. And then the orcs come in, the players in the building, and they're like, wait a second, we didn't think this out. We're gonna detonate the church. We're in the church. And so then they bailed out and stuff. And so it was a great night because it was a lot of planning, a lot of the players talking about what to do and having to scout out things. And that was a really fun session.
A lot of people have noted, and we always note between us and CDPR, that there's a big sort of thematic connection between Witcher and Cyberpunk. Both of them are very personal stories that do not shy away from making hard decisions and showing that actions have consequences. And I think that makes them, while they're not everybody's cup of tea, it makes them in some ways more relatable to a lot of people because it is usually a more grounded story. It's you know, it's not necessarily going out and saving the world or, you know, going out and doing grand world-sweeping things. It's, you know, fighting to survive and fighting to make your life better and help the people around you, your family and your friends and things like that. So I think, you know, the heavily personal nature of both Witcher and Cyberpunk, I think, make them not just interesting for people, but they resonate well with people.
Trip overall was awesome. I think
The
I'm
reaction.
putting too much odds in it, and I hate it. I used to be a public speaker.
Oh no, you're fine. It's like the excitement. It's just probably the trip was great,
The trip
man.
was awesome. I think that the plane ride on the way there was very sleepy. I put in my headphones and like listened to the same song on repeat until we got there. And then, was it Philly? Was it Philadelphia? Okay, I was bad asleep.
I'm bad with years, apparently.
Yeah, that too. Philly was great. Kind of a atmosphere I would want to live in eventually. The food market was rad. We ate there like every day. And just the sightseeing I got to do. I didn't get to go onto the bus trip, but the sightseeing I got to do was like put the world in perspective in a way like I'm not normally used to. I'm not from a big city, so it let me like experience that for more than like a vacation. It felt like a job in a good way. Like it felt like, hey, I can be doing this.
And did you enjoy like the people that we went with, like in the hotel, like?
Yeah. So we ended up having a Smash Bros tournament that got pretty wild, and that was great. Everyone who ended up going felt like they were super responsive to any, not, what's the word I'm looking for here, not issues, but any like feedback. Everyone was excited to be there, and it helped like make it feel less like a professional set, but more like a tight-knit group in like a good way. But yeah, I think overall the trip was fantastic. The people there were cool, and like not only just us, the people who went, but the people to talk to were like interesting and dynamic and filled with like a creative spark that you don't normally see in other media. And I think I want to do this a lot more.